Right now, something feels off in that garage. It's loud again, louder than it should be, and it's all pointed at one guy, a YouTuber, someone they still don't think belongs anywhere near a NASCAR grid. But here's the strange part nobody's saying out loud. Sometimes when a room gets this loud, it's because something bigger is being covered up. And then, out of nowhere, Richard Childress finally speaks. 77 years old. A man who built legends. The same man who put Dale Earnhardt Sr. in championship cars. And when he broke his silence, it didn't calm anything down. It made it worse. Because what he said didn't just defend Cleetus McFarland. It exposed something. But to understand why this hit so hard, you have to go back before Rockingham, before the green flag, before he even touched the track. Because the backlash started early, and it wasn't subtle. It started with Kyle Busch, and what he said, it spread like wildfire. He looked at Cleetus's resume, barely any starts, a rough Truck Series debut, 5 laps, and then he dropped a line that changed everything. He said his 10-year-old son had more experience. Let that sink in. That wasn't criticism. That was a message, a warning shot, and the garage heard it loud and clear. And that's when things started piling on. Kyle Petty doubled down, said guys like Cleetus don't belong out there, not with real drivers, not on that level. Then came Freddie Kraft, social media shots, highlighting the Daytona crash, questioning every move. And suddenly, it wasn't one opinion. It was a chorus. This doesn't belong here. This is a gimmick. And for a moment, it felt like the story was already decided. But then, Rockingham happened. Cleetus strapped into the 33 car, a Richard Childress Racing Chevy. April 4th, real race, real pressure. And yeah, it wasn't clean. Qualified 35th. Speeding penalty. Loose car all day. Finished 32nd, 6 laps down. On paper, it looked exactly like they said it would. And that's where most people stopped looking. But that's not where the story ends. Because something else happened that day. Something nobody in that garage could ignore. Ratings jumped 12%. Viewership up 11%. And that's where everything starts to shift. Because in a sport fighting for every fraction of attention, one guy, one race, moved the needle like that? That's not noise. That's impact. And suddenly, the conversation isn't about lap times anymore. It's about attention. And that's when Richard Childress stepped in and said what nobody else would. He didn't just defend Cleetus. He called it out, said the criticism had gotten excessive, reminded everyone he's a rookie, pointed out that ARCA P4 finish, not luck. And then he said the part that changed everything. He said some of these drivers are coming at him so hard because of jealousy. Jealousy. Not safety, not standards, not integrity. Attention. And suddenly, that loud garage doesn't sound the same anymore. Because now you're asking, who's really uncomfortable here? And it gets deeper. This wasn't random. This wasn't a stunt. This came through Ty Dillon. A conversation. An idea. And Childress saw it immediately. Not just a race entry. A pipeline. Because Cleetus isn't just a driver. He's 5 million subscribers. 5 million people who don't normally watch NASCAR. And if even a fraction of them show up, that changes everything. So now the question isn't, does he belong? It's, what happens if this keeps working? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. You can argue skill all day, but you can't argue numbers. And the numbers don't care how anyone feels. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Because Cleetus didn't back down either. He heard everything. Every comment, every shot. And when he spoke, it wasn't defensive. It was calm. He said if Childress offered any of those drivers a ride, every single one of them would take it. Every single one. And you know what? That hit just as hard. Because it's true. Nobody says no to that call. So maybe this was never about the opportunity. Maybe it was always about who got it. And that's where things get uncomfortable. Even Dale Earnhardt Jr. added another layer. He didn't approve him for super speedways yet. but he called the performance phenomenal. Think about that contrast. One side mocking, the other mentoring. After the race, Junior actually helped him, broke down the track, the tires, the difficulty. That's not dismissal, that's respect. And that difference? It says a lot more than the comments ever could. But here's the part nobody wants to sit with. That 11% jump at Rockingham. Not Daytona, not Talladega. So what happens when he gets there? What happens when Cleetus lines up at Daytona International Speedway or Talladega Superspeedway? If this was the reaction here, what's coming next? Because the business side of NASCAR is already asking that question, even if the garage isn't. And that's where this really shifts. Because yeah, the critics aren't completely wrong. He needs more laps, more experience. NASCAR holding him back from superspeedways, that's fair. But calling him a stain? A gimmick? That's where it breaks down. Because whether they like it or not, he brought people in. People who weren't watching before. And that's something this sport has been chasing for years. So now you're left with this. A guy who finished 32nd, 6 laps down, did more for viewership than most wins. And that's the part nobody knows how to deal with. Because it forces a question nobody wants to answer. What matters more? Tradition or growth? And maybe that's why the garage got so loud in the first place. Because deep down, they see it too. And they don't like what it means. Richard Childress made one thing clear. This isn't over. Not even close. More races are coming. More attention. More pressure. And if those numbers keep climbing, this whole narrative flips. Completely. So now the real question is, when that happens, who's going to admit they were wrong? Or are they just going to get louder?